Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh at Bethany Mandel is one of the authors at the Moms War Substack. She also is a frequent guest on this program, many other programs. You can follow her on X at Bethany Shondark. Bethany, you have probably followed as close as any American the hostage crisis. When those three hostages appeared, were you as shocked as I was? Because I was pretty shocked, as was the President of the United States.
I was shook but not shocked. We have been hearing from the hostages who were let out that they had been starved, that they had been chained, that they had been beaten. The testimony that came from the three men that were released on Saturday, they were the direct recipients of that experience, whereas the people who have been released prior, for the most part, weren't, because Hamas knew that they would be among the first to be released. The women, Yarden Bibas, Keith Siegel, who was an elderly American, but now Hamas is starting to get into the younger men who they've really truly brutally uh, treated and tortured over the course of the last 16 months. And I think it was because of their testimony and just the shocking physical appearance that they came out with that led to Hamas saying we're gonna turn off the spigot and stop the hostage releases indefinitely. And I think that the prayer is that they're going to feed the people that they have left so that they don't come out as shockingly malnourished as the first three did. But there's a lot of fear also that they've realized that they're not as valuable anymore and they might start killing them.
Now, I'll tell you what set me up is Gadi Moses set me up. I thought this
Yeah.
80-year-old man came out looking like he hadn't left the kibbutz and smirking. And then these three younger men have obviously been tortured and starved. So Hamas is
Yeah.
not just a terrorist, they're a barbarian. Well, everyone knew that from 10/7, but we have been reminded of it.
Yeah.
Do you think, I asked Dr. Orrin this earlier, but I want to ask you, do you think opinion has changed about whether or not to proceed with this deal in Israel?
I think that there's a sense of desperation. We've been saying as a civilized society and Western civilization, never again, never again. And now we're seeing history reflected back to us on our phones. We're seeing two men who emerged from hell to discover that their wives were both killed. And that one of those men also, his daughters were killed that day as well. And they mocked him on stage. They pulled him on stage. Eli Sharabi, they pulled him on stage. He is easily 70 pounds lighter than he was when he was kidnapped on October 7th. And they put him on stage and they asked him, "What are you most looking forward to seeing?" And he said, "My wife and my daughters." And the person who was interviewing him laughed. This is the level of barbarity that we're facing. And I think that Hamas has been trying to portray themselves in a positive light for a lot of the Western world who do eat up what they say. Oh, these girls, they weren't mistreated. Da, da." But when you see those men come out and they can't even walk, the game is over. And I think that Hamas realized that they're not coming out looking very good here.
So let me ask you, do you want Israel? Hey, I want America to do whatever Israel wants to do. That's my default proposition. If Bibi says we're going back to war, good on you. Because I think Blinken and Sullivan and Biden lied to us. I think they knew and they didn't tell us. Number two, do you think a threat to Iran would be effective? In other words, everybody out in 2 weeks, or we're taking out your oil facilities and your nuclear site.
So I wrote this. I believe it's running in the New York Post tomorrow, but I wrote a piece, I believe, for the New York Post, basically saying, you know, in the aftermath of World War II, there was a lot of questions about why FDR didn't bomb the railroad tracks leading into Auschwitz. And that was one of the things that stained his record permanently forever, especially among the American Jewish community. And I think that this is that moment for the American Jewish community when it comes to the hostages. There's an Auschwitz in Gaza where 76 people, including Americans, are being held, and something really drastic needs to be done to get them out right now. John and Rachel Goldberg Poland were both on Dana Perino's show today, basically saying that this has changed the calculus and added a level of urgency that was not there a week ago. I don't know what it needs to take. I think that, threatening the Qataris with, we're going to shut down the base, we're going to apply sanctions, you need to expel Hamas leadership. Everything has to be on the table because these hostages that are in Gaza, we now see they don't have days, they don't have weeks, and they certainly don't have months.
So I know you didn't hear the beginning of the show. I began with spring 1944. Roosevelt is given undeniable evidence of Auschwitz and the tracks
Great
and
line.
the excuses that were brought up by Strategic Air Command. We can't divert the bombers. We might hit the prisoners. None of them availing to history. It's a black mark on FDR and his State Department at the time, which was anti-Semitic. So that's part of the historical record. But I don't think threatening anybody but Iran will actually work. And do you think Israel will do that?
So there was indications that there was communication between Hamas leadership and Iran immediately preceding this announcement that they were going to shut off the hostage releases. So I think that that is true. I think that there's leverage that can be deployed with Qatar. I, you know, I don't know how much, but I think that both Iran and Qatar need to be on the table with exercising maximum pressure in order to bring this crisis to an end
Now,
before
the
the end of the
Goldberg
month.
Paulins are going to be my guests this week. They've asked to come on. Of course, I'm
Okay.
going to give them the platform. Do you think the hostage families agree with a ultimatum like this?
No, the hostage families are not a monolith. A lot of them believe different things. I'm glad that John and Rachel are going to be on your show. I think that they represent a pretty moderate voice within the parties. I think every family that I've ever spoken to appreciates their leadership, and I think that they are wonderful spokesmen for this crisis. I think that they're pretty careful not to put themselves in a position to be prognosticators and telling politicians what to do. Their mission is to just, talk about the level of urgency and, their son Hirsch, who was an American citizen, when his body was recovered, the torture and the starvation were apparent, not just with him, but with the five hostages that were executed along with him. One of the young women was 79 pounds the day that she was murdered. Um, so I think that they can really extend the level, they can express the level of desperation that all of these families are feeling to get a deal
Now,
done, whatever it is.
now, Bethany, I want you to go Old Testament with me. How righteous will be the anger of the Jewish people if this does not resolve soon?
I mean, the anguish is unlike anything. I mean, the last
Not anguish,
16 months has
anger,
been real anguish.
anger.
I know. I don't know. I don't know. It's something that we will never forget. I can say that for certain. This has changed the American Jewish community. It's changed the Israeli left. When President Trump said that the United States was going to take over Gaza and clean out the Palestinians there, the Israeli left, for the most part, were like, okay, if that's what it has to take, that's what it has to take.
Pause for a moment, if you will. I want to continue to talk to Bethany Mandel. Follow her on X at Bethany. Sean Dark, her Substack is Mom's War, and you ought to be reading that for a variety of reasons. I'm back with Bethany Mandel. Bethany, we should have known, we ought to have known, and perhaps we did at one level know what they were doing in the tunnels. But do you think the American reaction has changed to mirror that of Donald Trump's on the plane yesterday?
So I think that it did not get enough coverage on Saturday, and I think that's part of why Hamas is releasing these folks on Saturdays is to bury the coverage. Um, there is an American who was on the list who, there was only 3 more releases scheduled, and there was an American father, he's in his mid-30s, his name is Sagi Dekel-Chen. He was taken from his home in Kibbutz Nir Oz, and that would have been front page news. If he emerged from the tunnels in that condition as an American, the son of a university professor, that to me, I think would have broken through the sound wall it feels like we have in the American media covering this issue. I think that's what it would have done,
Soundwall,
and perhaps that's why.
I don't know if you watch Face the Nation. Margaret Brennan yesterday got in an argument with Bill Haggerty about whether UNRWA was part of Hamas or not. I mean, the level of stupidity is just immense.
Yeah.
She's not unique.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
kind of in the
I mean,
beltway. You can't say it.
there's also just a total apathy about the humanitarian crisis that's happening among these hostages. There's so much ink spilled about the situation in Gaza, and I'm not going to, discount or dismiss the fact that it is a humanitarian crisis, and that's part of why I support President Trump saying we need to relocate these, Palestinian civilians out of Gaza because it's just not safe. But what we've seen and what we've heard from these hostages that have been released, and what the conditions are for the remaining hostages, how are we not screaming this from the rooftops? I see it on your show, and I see it on Fox. I don't see it in the mainstream media. I don't see concern for Eden Alexander from New Jersey or Sagi Jekyll Chen from Connecticut. Where's the outrage? Why don't people know their names?
So, last question: should the Israelis return to war? In other words, they shouldn't leave Netzarim. That should be a non-starter since Hamas has broken the deal. But should they go back to killing Hamas?
If this ceasefire doesn't go through, absolutely. And I'm hearing from friends who are enrolled in, like, enlisted in the IDF as reserve soldiers, that they're getting the call, get yourself ready because we're going to go in guns blazing like we did in October of 2023 if this deal falls through, and they need to.
That, that means Saturday. Bethany Mandel, always welcome. Thank you for joining me on a grim Monday following a grim Saturday. I appreciate the time very much.